Good morning and welcome to today's LexisNexis webinar on how to use patent analytics for business development. Before we begin, I introduce myself and our speaker. I'd like to go over some housekeeping rules. First of all, this session is recorded. The slides and the recording of this session will follow post-webinar in an email. Where attributable handouts are referenced in this session, they're downloadable on the side from the control panel. Any questions, please do pose them via our chat box and we'll endeavour to answer them to the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to myself and our speaker. So by way of introduction, my name's Amit Alag. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Lexis. So I'm just checking, can you see my screen? Okay, here we go. By way of introduction, my name's Amit Alag, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at LexisNexis Intellectual Property and working with Patent Advisor. I'm joined today by Nick Valentino, a Lead Customer Success Manager for the US. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Amit.
As an agenda for today's discussion, we'll be covering the following: discussing the major themes facing patent prosecutors today, identifying additional challenges being communicated by our customers, and introduce the resources available within LexisNexis Patent Advisor related to law firm business development and benchmarking for corporates. So as of now, Nick, we have around 50 attendees, and I'm really keen to understand, given the mixed bag we have from law firm and in-house, before we tackle the first point in discussing the major themes facing patent prosecutors today, I'd love to hear from your perspective, what does business development mean from a law firm perspective and benchmarking from an in-house perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great way to level set. So from a customer perspective, the use cases that we're hearing in regards to business development, or maybe the various actions that can be involved under a quote-unquote business development use cases, would be as follows. From a law firm perspective, law firms would be identifying new prospects, whether that's in a current technology area that they are currently practicing, or maybe it's a new technology area they're trying to break into. Also, generating new business from current clients, where they're trying to, again, kind of break into different areas of technology they haven't had before. Maybe they're trying to take on new actions and services that they haven't offered to that customer before. And then also retaining business. And the keys to that are proving their success or efficiency with objective metrics to back the claims of subject matter expertise or potentially superiority in prosecution analytics. So being able to provide that objective data points to validate those points. And then from a corporate perspective, this would be confirming the use cases that are being distributed to outside counsel. So are you assigning the cases to the correct firm based off of their performance, or identifying and scouting new outside counsel? Again, that could be counsel emerging in a technology area you've been consistently filing in, or maybe that's if you're looking into breaking into R&D with white space, in a white space that you haven't been in before, and identifying tenured firm that would be able to accommodate your filings in that area. And then also, even potentially from an acquisition perspective for a corporation, doing some scouting to determine, well, maybe who are some new filers in a specific art unit or technology center. So those are all use cases we've been hearing directly from customers.
Thanks, Nick. That's incredibly helpful. And in terms of moving forward, why don't you let's transition to telling us about the major themes facing patent prosecutors today.
Great, yeah, of course. So we know from our research and also from customer feedback that law firm patent professionals year on year are under pressure to do more with less. They demonstrate their value to the business and show our ROI on the expenditure they are defending. These issues are further compounded by three themes that we come across consistently. So trying to do more with less, the pressure of time, essentially. The uncertainty, so trying to determine what the examiner is going to do next in terms of prosecution. And trying to be as predictable as possible with, if I can anticipate what's going to happen next, how can I transform my strategy to leverage that and get the best outcomes potentially for my cases.
So 3 unique challenges here. Can you elaborate on these points a bit more?
Sure. We can dive deeper into these points a little bit more and the challenges that come along with them. So if you transition to the next slide, what we can look at here is improving prosecution outcomes and managing expectations, generating more business, saving time, increasing ROI or validating ROI are some of the major asks or challenges that we come across and encounter hearing from our customers. And efficiently managing resources are all challenges. And each of these will form the basis of what we're going to go over today. The challenge I want to focus mainly on today is the generating more business from a law firm perspective and efficiently managing resources from our corporate audience among us perspective. So first, let's start with the firms. And expectations have never been higher. The decision on which firm to hire is maybe not always based on price alone and encounters other factors as well. So what we hear, customers are seeking law firms who are pragmatic, solutions oriented, and are very proactive in identifying potential issues that could be coming around the corner. So these are not so much transactional relationships anymore, but more business partnerships between the firms and the corporations. So if we transition over to the next slide, we can see that fierce competition from boutique firms focused on affordability, with that in mind, is now required to go above and beyond what might be typical marketing tactics, such as lawyer profiles, education, and touting recent successes. It means really evolving to meet the needs of customers and your clients who demand transparency and proof of performance against the competition that are basically vying for the same opportunities. So the solution to these challenges really lies in a proactive and data-driven approach to prosecution, and really helping with that transition over to a strategic business partner as opposed to just a transactional relationship. Continue on in the next slide. I'll be providing an insight on pitching law firm services to a leading vendor within one specific technology area that is a very interesting topic. It's definitely a new emerging technology. So AR/VR technology is the example we use here.
So Nick, we're about to go deep into the world of pitching law firm services to a leading vendor of AR/VR technology. Can you set the scene for us?
Sure, of course I can do that. So if you take me to the next slide, what we can see here is with the discovery of a prospect is key to successfully building out an analytics presentation, as it provides the framework for which use cases and questions you would ultimately be addressing with the prospect. From the points above that I mentioned, we have identified that the prospect is continuing to invest heavily in this area of technology and is committed to entertaining new resources to expand their knowledge base. In addition, the need for understanding historical performance is key, along with providing a value methodology that they can adopt. So what you would be able to do by utilizing examiner analytics, you can market your firm more effectively using metrics such as our efficiency score in Patent Advisor, where you can compare how efficient you are in handling examiners with different examiner time allocation scores, which is our traffic light scoring for examiners, red, yellow, green, depending on essentially what is the effort it's going to take to get to an allowance with those examiners. In addition, Patent Advisor is able to also benchmark your firm against others in relations to other metrics such as like time from first office action to allowance. And basically these are all, when you're trying to assess what are the pain points or the use cases of the customer, doing that discovery, you would be able to use some of these metrics I'm mentioning in addition to other metrics to provide concrete evidence and validation to those questions. If we transition to the next slide, please, Amit, we can continue the conversation around the metrics.
Thanks, Nick. That's really good insight. Can you talk me through this bubble chart and show us what we're seeing?
Sure. So identifying the entire technological landscape of a prospect will really help firms assist with understanding how specialized their business is and potentially open future opportunities. The size of the bubbles in the chart relates to the number of patent applications in each technology area. So from this type of analysis, what we can really do is identify what are the primary technology centers based off of filing volume. And the conclusion from here is that, well, we're looking at where our technology, which is the main, in this exercise, the main forward-looking technology of interest for the prospect, we can see that isn't historically one of their primary technology centers. So this validates and confirms from our conversations with them that this is an emerging technology area for them. And now what we can do is, continuing on in our discussion here in our analysis, is on the next slide, we can illustrate additional steps that a law firm may use to benchmark against other competitors the corporation may be using. So in this next slide, a corporation can generate a benchmark report displaying the performance of the outside counsel. So we are looking at, from the filings associated with that assignee, we are seeing who are the firms that are listed on their applications, and that's being proactively pulled without having to know that information firsthand. And these report cards are a mixture of both basic universal prosecution statistics, such as allowance rate, but also our metrics that I've mentioned before with the Patent Advisor Efficiency Score, as well as the taking into account the gradings of examiners, the distribution of examiners across the examiner time allocation. So we can really see how a corporation or even a firm doing this due diligence, we're able to see how the current firms that are prosecuting for that corporation, how they are comparing to each other.
Thanks for this description. Can you elaborate on the potential use case of this from a corporate perspective?
So this type of side-by-side view would allow a direct comparison of the outside counsel. And just to expand upon that, the chart we're looking at is looking at allowance rates. So we can see who has the highest allowance rates in whatever technology areas this report is run on. So the report can be run on one or a combination of multiple technology areas, from the technology center down to the art unit. So based off of those selections, you can get insights and be informed on who has those highest allowance rates, and that could help with determining where patent applications are steered in the future for future filings. And to further elaborate, if you transition to the next slide, I can dive into this a little bit more. Here's another example of basic prosecution data that can be compared. So if we're looking here at the average number of office actions to issuance, a corporation can begin to dive into the data to determine if the correct firm has been assigned to the correct cases. Some of the other prosecution benchmarks statistics that can be added to this type of report and to have that side-by-side comparison would be the percentage of patented applications with at least one RCE and the percentage of patent applications with at least one appeal. I'm highlighting those because these are the things that we know are being brought up as really interested on how many RCEs are within applications, what are the number of appeals. This all goes into the strategy and the understanding of the prosecution lifecycle for applications from a corporate lens perspective. Each of those things takes more time, costs more money. So these are kind of some type of mind metrics that we are hearing are important. So if you transition to the next slide, if we look here at looking at prior prosecution performance, that is one real key aspect. If you understand the historical activities of the prospect, this would then help you identify what are the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities that you could pitch and position yourself for with that prospect moving forward. The historical overview in and of itself may be a value add, as really some of the prospects don't have tools that give them these types of insights. They might be interested themselves in understanding, well, how have we performed historically? We don't have metrics around that. So even though you might think you might be showing them something that they already know, there is the potential and the opportunity that just showing them this is how you performed is giving them data that they didn't have, and really then can provide a lot of credibility and value add just really right up front. And then over that, you can overlay what potential strategies or modifications, enhancements that you can make, that you could pitch to their prosecution strategy to improve upon the information that you've now provided to them. So certain things such as allowance rate, application status by year, and rejection frequencies really can provide a lot of context and point out recurring themes to the prospect. Now, if we look at it the lens from, so we look at reviewing prior prosecution performance from the law firm lens. So on the next slide, we can see here utilizing the same view, but if we populate it with law firm data, we can highlight the areas where your firm's expertise could then provide that performance improvement. So not only are you telling the prospect, this is how historically we have been told by our clients we provide value, then you can show here are the statistics that back up those statements. Again, that objective lens that can really just solidify your pitch. In addition, we can showcase that track record has been sustained over a period of time. So there's filing status trend analysis that could highlight that your subject matter expertise and your basically that historical performance over time can be highlighted quickly. And then if we jump to the next slide, if we get into then comparing prosecution performance, we can dive more into the details here and really differentiate upon the examiners within the USPTO. So some examiners are more difficult than others when it comes to prosecution and receiving allowances. Patent Advisor was built upon basically trying to understand your examiner and try to understand what has been their historical performance and their historical trends, so that you can better navigate and develop strategies based off of their behavior, how they have behaved in the past. So Patent Advisor's efficiency score that I mentioned, where we can see how quickly a firm or a corporate is bringing their applications to disposition. This levels the playing field by scoring every application for efficiency and based on different standards for red, yellow, and green examiners. So in that case, red are going to be difficult, green are going to be the easier examiners in terms of trying to get to allowance. The efficiency score is calculated from components such as time to grant, number of office actions, and RCEs. Just to reiterate, basically at a high level, essentially how quickly an application is being brought to disposition. And we are kind of taking out the examiner's behavior from that perspective. We are correcting or normalizing for that, and we're really more so focusing on what are the behaviors of the corporation and the law firm, essentially. So with this additional component, this allows us to basically say, well, what are the activities that you have control over if we take the examiner out of the picture? And a higher efficiency performance with red or difficult examiners is where we see that firms can really show their value and set themselves apart from the competition. And if you move to the next slide, please, and we continue this comparison of prosecution performance. Traditional patent prosecution metrics can also be leveraged to communicate the potential value a firm may provide. So time savings potential due to shorter average time from first office action to allowance, or having a smaller share percentage of patent applications with one or multiple RCEs. These are all some of the metrics that you can add onto these performance reports and benchmarking reports, where you can really put your firm in a very positive light with these objective metrics. And further, and then that'll really help you drive home your value propositions that you are providing during your pitches. Going to the next slide, where we have identifying the competition. Really, it's with looking at the data and with the visuals we have here, obtaining this competitive intelligence is very easily generated for a prospect. The report that we're looking at here, it generates a list of law firms that are prosecuting applications for the prospect within technology areas that you select, and also over certain periods of time. So you can see maybe who has recently been working with the corporation, or maybe who historically, and that can give you some context on maybe there were reasons for shifts. Maybe they're even scout who might potentially come back around and be aware of that, of prior relationships. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and insights into understanding what have been the prior relationships in the past. So what you can do with this, not only can see what firms you're competing against, you can obtain their performance metrics that you would then be able to pull out and benchmark the strengths and weaknesses, and really the value propositions that you're trying to provide. And if we jump to the next slide, continuing with this identification of competition, we can see which outside counsels are working the most efficiently and effectively, comparatively, based on our metrics, such as the efficiency score metrics, as opposed to the examiner score metrics that we have typically in the past relied upon.
Thanks, Nick. This is interesting. And just so my understanding, and that of everybody else in this webinar, I'm assuming the x-axis is the patent advisory efficiency score and the y-axis is the allowance rate. So given that, would it be a fair assumption, on my understanding, to assert that the position you want to be in is in law firm D?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. That's a fair assumption. That green shaded area, that landing area, is really generally the desired location. That green shaded area, what is identifying is above average efficiency scores. So how quickly you're bringing, just as a reminder, how quickly you're bringing applications to disposition within the technology centers. So that green shaded area, depending on which technology centers that you select in your report, can vary from report to report. But that green area is going to be that above average area. Within that green shaded area, just to give a little bit more of context, the further right you are on the chart, it equates to a higher efficiency score. That efficiency score is on a 0 to 100% scale. So the further we are to the right, closer to 100, the higher the score. And the higher on the vertical axis reflects a higher allowance rate. So if we're looking at this example here, the interpretation of the positioning would equate to that firm D is bringing applications to disposition quickest with also the highest allowance rate. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First would be the context. What is the base that we're talking to in terms of number of applications? That is important because you might have some firms that have larger data sets than others, which is going to be harder to have higher allowance rates or higher efficiency scores just due to the sheer volume. So the way that you can understand that is that the larger the bubble size, the more applications for that law firm in the data set. So in the case we're looking at, law firm A, because they have the largest bubble, they would have the highest number of applications. Now, that green shaded area, I'm going to say that's like generally that is the desired location. Now, what we have heard from some customers is that depending on the technology area you're in, you might actually want, in some certain use cases, you might actually want a firm in the red area, which is the below average in terms of efficiency, because that technology area, it leads to having some more back and forth with the examiner than in maybe the majority of other technology areas. So I do want to make sure that I do point that out. And then if we jump over to the next slide, Amit, please. What we are looking at here is trying to promoting your impressive prosecution performance. So taking benchmarking out where you're stacking yourself up to specific firms, or looking at firms within a specific corporate assignee, you can pull up just your overall performance or your performance that is filtered down to certain technology areas. And we call this our law firm report card. And this is a way that you can, again, provide that there's objective metrics to demonstrate your prosecution efficiency. And what this does is it allows you to benchmark against the average prosecution performance of the examiners encountered within the data range that you select, both from the technology perspective as well from the date perspective. So instead of individual firms, you are benchmarking yourself onto the average of, say, an art unit or a technology center or technology center group. And this can provide and really just give you those quick visual impacts with the green there that says, well, if our firm is performing above average of the everyone else within this data set, then you can see those green visualizations that just quickly point it out and drives that point home. And kind of one of the things I had mentioned in the beginning from the business development perspective and what are some of the use cases and actions that go into that, is trying to find new prospects. And what you can do, if we jump to the next slide, Amit, is utilizing some of these charts that we've seen to figure out exactly who are the corporate prospects within certain technology areas. So the learnings and materials that I've shown and that you're looking at right now can be used as a baseline for approaching other companies within either the same technology space or a different technology space. The new prospects can be easily identified by drilling into the technology areas of interest. And then in a list of companies showing the number of filed applications within that technology will appear. So you'll be able to see not only who are some of the larger, well-known prospects in the technology area. But then you would also be able to identify who are maybe some of the smaller players or medium players who are maybe new prospects that are coming into the technology area, and really get in the ground level there with them. So very useful. I mean, that list is very valuable and saves a lot of time trying to have to pull and identify that information manually. So that drill down capability into a technology area is very, very useful and helpful.
Thank you for your time, Nick. I personally have found this presentation insightful, and I would like to open up the floor for questions. I've got a couple of questions queued up, so I'll commence with the first one. But if you have any questions, please don't be shy. Put them in the chat box, and Nick and I will endeavour to answer them. So the first question I have is here: which LexisNexis product is this? How do I know if my firm has this product? I will say, before I hand over to Nick, this is LexisNexis Patent Advisor, and I would say to speak to your librarian or your LexisNexis rep, or equally, we can follow up with you after this call. So Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, any of your contacts at LexisNexis would be able to tell you that. Your client manager who you interact with on a daily basis, your customer success manager who assists you with your trainings and onboardings and technical support. And again, any internal points of contact from a technology perspective, those would be my recommendations to check.
Another question I have here is, where does the greatest ROI lie in this business development? Is it from a corporate perspective or a law firm perspective, or is it equal?
I think there's value from both perspectives. The efficiency to pull this information on both sides of the coin is going to provide a lot of value return for both. I mean, the ability to easily identify and pull lists seems very simple, but that in and of itself is a very large time saving exercise, as well as the ability to quickly generate reports for historical performance and be able to filter and slice that information in various ways to tell your story are things that can take a matter of minutes, as opposed to something that may historically have taken hours to do before.
Thanks, Nick. Another question I have here is, given the sort of recession climate we're in at the moment, is it worth proactively using these tools to evaluate current activities, or only use them when there is an opportunity to revisit your panel of law firms, for example?
I think we found, I mean, these type of tools can be used to have a pulse on what your prosecution performance looks like. I mean, looking at it from an efficiency score perspective, that can give you insight into how, are there potential cost savings? I mean, if you're already a highly efficient firm or organization, then that can lead to you, we're doing the right thing, and maybe we look elsewhere. But if you see that score is lower, there is the potential there, if you clean up some of and make maybe some tweaks to what the current prosecution strategy is, that can lead to quicker decisions on your end, again, taking the kind of the examiner's behavior out of it, to understand, can we identify maybe different strategies for either responses, or even looking at abandonment rates, to see metrics if that makes more sense earlier in the stage than later, which could ultimately lead us to greater efficiencies and cost savings in the future. So I think it's something that you can consistently keep an eye on, but again, depending on what is specific to your organization's performance, which you can see that historical performance could dictate what is the need more urgent, or is it something that we should just continually monitor and just keep a running tab of.
Thanks, Nick. I've got another question here that's come through. Is there an application complexity graph for assignees like there is for law firms? Does it split out by red, yellow, and green examiners?
Can you say that question again, Emmett?
Yeah. is there an application complexity graph for assignees like there is for law firms? Does it split out by red, yellow, and green examiners?
There is the comparison reports. Those can be run either at a law firm lens or from a corporate lens. So the examples that we have, the law firms are the ones generated there, but our benchmarking reports can be also run on corporations. So yes, you would still have that table where it breaks down the efficiency score between the red, yellow, and green examiners.
Okay, so I'm just going to pivot to the next question. As I understand it, the efficiency score is based strictly on efficiency and not on quality. In turn, it appears that if you fight for broader claims, you could lower your score, even though your end work product might be much better. Sorry, I've lost it here. Might be much better. I also know that you have another metric where you compare your claim length against average claim lengths examined by the same examiners. Are there plans to adjust the efficiency score to incorporate elements of quality claim length?
So from the quality of the claims, yes, we have started incorporating some comparisons, averages on length of claims, the length of documents as well to the average. You'll see is there's no color coding on those, as what we found in our research, there's various interpretations on, it's very subjective on is more, less, or better in those aspects. So we're just providing those numbers, and those can be interpreted as whatever the methodology for that organization is, with a corporate or firm perspective. That is correct that the efficiency score is just looking at kind of timeliness. It's not taking into the account that quality perspective, which is one of the reasons I mentioned that caveat with reading that chart is depending on, and then this goes to the relationship with between the law firm and the organization to make sure they're on the same page on what is the strategy. Maybe that corporation wants you to be in the red because you're looking, they want to proactively actually be fighting back and going back and forth with the examiner more on the claims. That can actually help validate that you are working on that organization's strategy. What we've heard kind of more holistically is with many of the other technology centers or more general common use cases, the efficiency scores in the green typically is the main use case that we're seeing. However, there is a valid use case, and what was brought up in the chat and what we have heard directly from some customers in certain technology areas. As of right now, we do not have any plans to, we're still scoping out the quality, taking the quality of claims and how that'll be fleshed out, and if that will ultimately be in the efficiency score or not in the future. So that is something we've been looking into and researching, but as of right now, no concrete plans to announce to anybody.
Okay. There's another comment here, which I think is a partial question. It says, this compares claim length specifically. Is that something you've cited in this presentation about comparing claim length?
I don't believe we had a visual on that in here, but if we look at the law firm report cards, there is a section where they do have the number of claims, the number of words in the claim, both application and then the grant of that law firm, again, sliced off of the different technology area, the date range, compared to then the average of the applications that are included with that same examiners that are in that data set that was selected. As well as then the length of in terms of pages of the documents as well, again, published versus granted document. So there is a section in the law firm report cards on those quality metrics from a claim perspective.
Okay. So from my perspective, I think these are all the questions that have come through. But that said, Nick and I are happy to stick around answering questions that may have arisen that we may have missed. Equally, if there's anything that we haven't addressed, we're happy to follow up after the session. But I'd like to express a big thanks to Nick for joining us today, and a thank you all for attending. We will follow up with a webinar recording and slides and other assets over the coming days, but we're at your disposal if you have any questions. And I wish you a lovely day. Thanks for your time, all of you.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, everyone.